the feet of Bobby Kennedy so he can understand that if we need to make America healthy, we need to start with our soil. As some of you heard, a year and a half ago, I had a once-in-a-lifetime call saying, can you put together a regenerative farm tour an hour outside of DC? We hustled and bustled, made it happen, and then a day or two before, it gets canceled. I called Bobby, he apologized, he called me back, and said, we just have to take it slow. I'm aligned, we can do this. I have the trust of the secretary, I have the trust of the president, but we just need to make incremental steps. It's literally, I'm overwhelmed, I'm overjoyed. It's beyond my belief that we're here on Sovereignty Ranch in Bandera, Texas, with all these extraordinary human beings and the innovation that they bring getting to present to you. All right, let's give it up for these amazing people. And my sister and Taylor are going to take it off. They're going to moderate this panel. Here's my sister, Mollie Engelhart. Taylor from Acres USA. Take it away.
Welcome all of you for coming and being willing to learn about the new technologies and the new practices and the old practices that can really change the health of our children. Honestly, there's nothing more important than our health. A nation can have all the guns and all the weapons in the world, but if we're not healthy, we have nothing. I just want to thank all of you guys for being the ones in the world that want to know this information. I want to thank all of these thought leaders and technology and money and all the different people that are here on this stage that are giving their life and their dedication to making this move forward. I want to thank the Secretary for being willing to listen and being willing to amplify what is going on for farmers, because sometimes it feels like we're in a vacuum and nobody can hear us. I just want to acknowledge you for taking the time and really platforming these farmers and hearing what we're doing in the world. I really appreciate that. I want to ask that every single one of you leaves here today and goes to your community and you be the light of regeneration and you spread that. We are not just demanding a future, but we are being the future that we want. We have to be willing to change our mind. We have to be willing to say, I've been using glyphosate for this much time and now I'm not going to do it anymore. I know that more than anybody because I was a well-known vegan chef with 5 restaurants in Los Angeles, and now I'm a Texas cattle rancher doing regenerative agriculture. If that mind can be changed, all of our minds can be changed. And literally every single act of bravery of saying publicly, I believed this and I was wrong, and now I believe this, gives other people permission to do that. Taylor is our partner in this event and is the custodian of so much of this information with Acres USA, and I'm going to hand it off to him.
Thank you, Mollie. Thank you, Rylan. Thank you, Secretary Kennedy, for coming out and listening to such important topics. Who feels like they're more educated and feel a positive force moving towards in agriculture after the last couple days? I'm a regenerative farmer. I'm an example of someone in their 30s who was able to buy land and start a farm without any sort of inheritance or any sort of startup. Acres USA I ended up buying 2.5 years ago. It is the oldest publisher in North America on organic and alternative agriculture production. Education, in our opinion, has been funneled through a certain lens over the years, and we've always been stuck on this fringe as an idea of kind of the hippie crazy farmers on the side that are not really making it work. We believe that education is the key to agriculture and the key to farmers having success. Technology is beautiful, we're going to leverage it in the future, but if our farmers are not educated, then nothing will actually work. I think we've been conditioned to believe that farmers can't handle complex systems. And we do have complex systems in our soil, and the products the education that we've published over 50 plus years has the answers on how to give you your freedom back by being able to have your soil produce for you, which then produces healthy food and a healthy rural economy for all of us. So I hope through technology and everything else that you hear today, we can expose the stories of the innovators and the early adopters who are having success, not only in their soil, but economically. With Rick Clark is a perfect example of someone who's taken education and installed it into his own operation, and his operation is set to thrive for many, many years. So with that, I'm excited for you to hear Rick's story about his farm and his journey.
Thank you. Thank you. It's an absolute honor to be here, honor to be sitting next to this gentleman. The power that is in this room is unbelievable. we've been on this journey for about 18 years, and it wasn't called regenerative then. I start with this slide right here every time because this is the family, this is the backbone of our operation, this is the people that believe in what we're doing, and that is so important to have that. I've been blessed every day of my life, and I continue to be blessed. What I really want to try to get out today in these few minutes is that this is possible with the proper teaching that Taylor's talking about. I think a lot of the policy that needs to change needs to come through RMA. I think RMA needs to understand what the cover crop is, how it is being utilized, and how it is not a detriment, and if it is used in the proper way. Those farmers are taught, they're educated. I mean, every county, don't quote me on this, I don't know if it's every county, but almost every county in the United States has an official from the USDA working at it. So that force of teachers are there. Let's get those teachers taught. Let's start an RMA. Let's get policy change. I mean, relay cropping was considered a no-no, and now relay cropping has been approved and accepted. So this can be done. Again, RMA needs to be educated on what is right and what is wrong about the cover crops and how they're being used. Okay? Now, there are situations that it's not good. You drive by and it's a train wreck. It is. There are also situations that it's working, it's flowing, and that farmer, I believe in attrition. You get a farmer to start just one thing and make it right the first time, and they will slowly wonder, what has taken me so long to do this? And they will get to that point. Now, I got a couple slides I'd like to show. This, Mr. Kennedy, is a way that we will do planting soybeans into a cereal rye crop. Now, this particular cereal rye crop has already reached maturity, so we're going to roll it down with a tool that's called a roller crimper. As this tool goes by, and this cereal rye is at a stage of life called anthesis, which is dropping its pollen, it's ready to fertilize the seed. And at that point, that plant is very vulnerable to being terminated. That plant at this point is basically already starting to die after that roller crimper went by. Now we have a planter coming through and planting soybeans. There's been no chemistry sprayed to this point. It's June the 2nd. Here is July the 16th. No sprays, nothing. I'm a very firm believer that we need to meet the farmers where they are on the journey, get them the education they need, and then start moving them forward. So if this was an example of a conventional, I'm going to call it a conventional type farmer that is using chemistry and using fertility, up to July 16th, nothing has been applied to this field. Now, if you were using chemistry and you felt like this might get a little hairy by harvest, make one pass of a low herbicide pass and then move on and harvest the field and have great success. You have, at this point, reduced inputs on this particular situation by at least 70%. That's a big deal. We planted on June the 2nd, and it was July 16th. So 50 days, whatever that math is. You can see that dead brown is obviously that cereal rye that was rolled flat. We have to go slow with this. I think a lot of times we look at things as either all or none, and I don't think that's correct. If you were to take I'm just going to use rough numbers, so please don't quote me and tell me I'm wrong here, but it's around 900 million acres that are in the United States being farmed, and if you had a 30% reduction of inputs on that acreage, that's 270 million acres. That's a bunch of ground. That is a bunch of good. That is a lot less nitrates going into the water system, phosphate, all that is being drawn down at a tremendous amount. So we have to step back and we have to say, what does success look like? And I'm telling you, there's a book by Malcolm Gladwell. I believe the tipping point is 11%. That's not very much, folks. And the whole thing just goes. We can do this. Input reductions. From 11 to 23, this is what we've been able to do. We've reduced diesel fuel by 46%, horsepower by 64. No more of this stuff here. What does this mean? The savings of the fuel is 62. Now this is on an operation that's our size. Synthetic N would be that much savings. The MAP, the potash, the lime, the chemistry. And I always make a joke about the chemistry, and I'll just go ahead and tell it to you, Mr. Kennedy. We spent $500,000 on chemistry spraying on row crops that created weeds that are resistant to the chemistry that we're spraying. That is an oxymoron.
Rick, for people that don't know, what size is your operation?
About 6,500 acres of organic, regenerative organic. Right now, we're at about $2.4 million of savings per year. Now, when you look at our system, are we going to win the state fair contest on yield? No, we are not. But it's not about yield. This is about running a business. Car makers don't make cars to just make cars. They make cars to make money. The farming business or the farming industry needs to be treated the same way. How can we be good to Mother Nature, and how can we become more profitable? That's what this is about. So I'll wrap it up with this. Our system at home is all about driving toward human health, soil health, and profitability. That's what it's all about. Thank you for your time.
Next up is Clint Brauer from Greenfield Robotics, and he has been led to change his life as well, and he's going to tell a little bit about his story.
I've been told that Mike goes everywhere, so let me know. Somebody raise your arm in the back. Greenfield Robotics, let's get into it. I'll take you through my story. I actually grew up on Greenfield Road, hence the name, but I actually did not come up with the name, and didn't even realize how my co-founder came up with the name until 2 years later, so there you go. I graduated K-State, those are my sisters, and I was really anxious to leave the farm, and I moved to LA. I started working with a startup called W3 Design that became US Web. We went public. I was part of an IPO by the time I was 24, learned a lot. From there on, for about 13 years, I started companies or helped start companies. I've only had one job that someone else had before me in my life. I'm 52 years old. Sony Music, Sony Pictures, even all those things were new divisions, new media. And I was fortunate. It was a great time to get in the internet and learn all these things. I wanted to show that picture there because that was when I was young and really good shape. That's all that's about. They've asked me to share a little bit, kind of my background, and I just want to do this real quick. When I was 16, I ended up in a library and I grabbed that book, Power Shift. And I read that book, strangely enough, for a 16-year-old. And I got hooked on economics. Alvin Toffler, if you don't know who that is, he was an advisor to Reagan. Him and his wife actually co-wrote the books. I really got into economics, and like I like to say, especially to my wife, I know I have the most boring hobby in the world, economics. I always look at things through that lens since age 16. That got me to start reading the Wall Street Journal then, and basically all the way through college, I got the Asian Wall Street Journal and the Wall Street Journal. I'm telling you all this for a reason, and we'll get to that. When I moved to LA, someone told me to read The Fourth Turning when I was 23 years old. That's kind of framed some things for me as well. In terms of mentor, that guy on the right, he's unfortunately no longer alive, but his name was Keith Boski. Keith basically taught me how to work within large companies, and he inspired me because he created the movie Tomb Raider, basically. When no one said video games could, he was president of IDOS in his mid-20s, and no one said you could make a video game into a movie, and he did it. It was on the front of the Wall Street Journal. You can't do this, they all lose money. He pulled it off, then he took over all the Robert Ludlum stuff and did all that. And he's, today, the smartest businessman I've ever known. So he would take his Saturdays, and this is this education piece, and he would take his Saturdays and meet me at a cafe and basically tell me how many things I didn't understand in a very nice way. And I learned so much from it. These things are really critical to Greenfield, actually, at this point. Then 13 years in LA, my dad's name was Tony, and I went through a divorce, and my dad came down with Parkinson's. I decided, my parents had always been there for myself and my sisters, so I decided I was in a better place to move back to Kansas. Parkinson's, he was a very early no-till farmer, and he used paraquat. I thought it was time to come back. I didn't want to stress him out, so eventually I said, hey, I want to get chemicals out of food. I'll focus on the Wichita area in Kansas City. I built 2 greenhouses with the help of some construction guys with my own hands and their hands. We built one in Topeka with my cousin. We put learning disabled kids to work. And we had about 10,000 square foot of greenhouses growing at peak, year-round. 25 grocery stores, 35 restaurants. I grew 100 plus different crops. I also grew vegetables outside before that, and I learned how hard that is to do in South Central Kansas. The story I always tell is, when I was in LA, I picked up boxing. I got to the point I could box 20 rounds with 30 seconds off in about 100-degree heat, and I was fine. I think you drink a lot of water. When I started growing up to 7 acres outdoors, I'm telling you, it was like I'd never boxed or anything. It is extreme work, and anyone who's raised produce at any scale outdoors knows that. It was brutal. I got to see firsthand just how hard it is for a small-scale farm to cost compete at a local level and to do it the right way. These robots have a plan for that. Second thing, regenerative supply chain, and I actually called it what I called it integrated farming before I learned about guys like Rick Clark. And I had a consultant in 2017. I created what I believe was the first regenerative supply chain for pet food companies starting in 2015. Better get to the robots before they cut me off here. So our mission is to remove toxic chemicals from our food supply. That's long story short on that. Nope. We have 2 robots in market. The first one goes between the rows and over the top of wheat and oats and that kind of stuff, so it can spread cover crop seed, it can boom foliar. Those 2 things are not in market yet, 18 months. The bottom 2 are in market today in 16 states. The one on the left has been testing for 5 years, and it eliminates, it's the final piece to get rid of the paraquat, to get rid of the burden down. So it takes a cover crop similar to what you were doing, except it mulches it for 10 inches wide and injects the seed under the mulch. And you can keep your cover crop in place between those rows and trim it. So here's what this looks like for weed suppression. So this is probably going to move a little slower than I would like, but I'm not sure how to speed it up at this point. So this is your winter cover crop. It could be a rye, it could be wheat, it could be oats. It's plain. So then you come in with this machine and you mulch between the rows. So that's what the mulcher looks like today. Runs along the mulches. Now you've got that mulch, that same machine we swap out, and it'll show us at some point that it mulches that. And I want to point out, we've tested this for 4 years on my fields. We've had no weeds in row for 50 days. 50 days. No herbicide can do that. Maybe yours, I'm not sure. Then we put in the soybeans into the row there. We have 2 different planters, and that's one of them, and then we have another one we customize and work with. So now what do you have? You have no inrows. So you have no burn down, no residual. So now you can see the soybeans are growing, and what do you have left? You still have that cover crop. It didn't get roller crimped. It's still potentially living if you want it. You cut that cover crop lower and lower as the season goes. That's the way that works. Now, the last thing the robots do is your soybeans are maturing, and this can work for a lot of crops. We've done multiple. It's a pretty hoopty looking machine. It's not done yet. But this is where we go and we spread cover crops. So just to give you an idea, does this work? We did it with Missouri soy last year, and we have 5 foot tall cover crop. Next week, literally on Monday, I'll be in Columbia in a field mulching that cover crop and planting. The last thing is, I'm a regenerative farmer too. I raise sheep. It's actually one of the more profitable things I do. And I raise sheep, and then we have other folks raising cattle.
Next we have Frank Glatz from Contact Biosolutions. They developed an alternative to herbicide. Frank, go ahead.
Hi, I'm Frank Glatz. I'm the Managing Director of Contact Biosolutions. What we do, we achieved the breakthrough innovation in bioherbicide for cover crop and crop desiccation. So we talk about backgrounds. Let's talk about mine. I'm German Australian, spend a lot of time here in the US, and I'm a serial environmental entrepreneur. This is my 3rd business. The first 2 were in bioplastics. I changed Nestle over to compostable packaging. We rolled out organic waste bags of multi-million in different kind of countries, and really moved forward into that kind of field. What I usually do, and we're talking about Contact Biosolutions, we're really looking in the area where are environmental kind of technology issues. How can we bring in technology to resolve these issues? Contact Biosolutions, we looked at herbicides. Herbicides being a $40 billion market, as we all know. If you spray a weed to kill the weed with a chemical herbicide, you effectively kill the weed, but what you have an impact on the environment, on the soil, on the waterways, and potentially yourself. So therefore we at Contact Bio Solutions, we started for Firehawk bioherbicide with a product that has an active ingredient. It's a natural occurring ingredient. It's called nonanoic acid. Our background is in health science, so therefore we worked a lot on delivery technology for health supplements. We worked on a health supplement in particular skin applications where we developed a delivery technology to get creams into the skin. We combined that with our nonanoic acid technology and achieved a bioherbicide of much higher strength than what you usually can see. So therefore that's what we continued. We're not an overnight success, we're 8 years in, and I have to admit I've never been in a bad first meeting. Everyone loves our environmental credentials, but then it's all about performance, regulatory approval, and cost. That's our space. So if you make that bigger, we can even operate it. We delivered a Firehawk bioherbicide that is a broad spectrum contact bioherbicide. It's non-selective desiccation of broadleaf weeds and grasses, and I can comment to Clint later on how long everything lasts because we achieved the numbers that he talked about. We have a nature identical active ingredient that's readily biodegradable. We have no withholding periods. We exempt of maximum residue food limits because our product is already in food chains. It's effective on glyphosate resistant and invasive weeds, and we have done a lot of studies and case studies. As we spray and how we desiccate the weed with a delivery system in there, we're actually beneficial for soil health. And we're organic input certified in Australia, which is our home market. So based on that, we're now in markets in the home and garden market, in municipality and landscape, as well into specialty agriculture. As you can see here, we're really operating very large vineyard operations or potato operations. But as I said, this is not about product performance, this is about regulatory approval. And I would like to highlight that to the Mr. Secretary. When I was 7 years ago, first time at EPA, they really said, hey Frank, your kind of product we really like. It's good. It should take 2 to 3 years to approval. Then all this litigation started and the process got much tougher. So we then had to approve our active ingredient, our formulation, then we went into state regulations, including California, and the whole process took 6 to 7 years. So therefore surviving as a technology startup with that kind of timeline to market is a nightmare. But anyway, we got there, we're fully funded, we're accelerating into market, and we're really focusing now. As I said, we're launching this month in 500 retail stores across the US. We're working in landscaping, municipality. Harvard University is using it for the last 3 years, and they're the lead market in this landscaping area. We're in horticultural operations in really big vineyards, in almond orchards, pistachio farms, apple orchards and so on, and especially horticulture we already have a foothold. But now, of course, we're moving into regenerative farming has been on the map for our business from the beginning. Our board advisors to start the business included Gabe Brown, that everyone knows. He was on our founding advisory board. We have Ray Archuleta on our advisory board. Martin Crompton is on our advisory board. They're in here. They teach us about regenerative farming. They gave us clear guidance. And the guidance was a lot about cost. Product works, but cost. I thought I'd just select this slide that gives you a feeling for, on the top left-hand side, chemical herbicide. A lot of us perceive them as toxic, but they're cheap. If you look at the first generation of bioherbicides, they're around and they're in market. They are non-toxic, low tox, but they're very expensive. Mainly because you can't dilute them as much. They're not poisons. You have to dilute them, you can't dilute them so much, and you have to spray a lot because we're contact herbicides, inherently higher cost. But our product is the first one on the green because of our delivery technology, we can dilute more. So therefore our cost structure lower. We have now in several reiterations, fully approved in 48 states, a super concentrate that's a third of the cost. Now we're working on really focusing on application cost, reducing cost. That's what we're doing with Magritech, a magnetic spraying technology that reduces spray drift and much improves performance. If you go to the last slide, please. We're in regenerative farming, cover crop. We've seen it 3 slides. We're in cover crop. We're going with a magnetic sprayer. We're going down rig down to 20 or 15 gallons per acre spray rates and is effective there. Cost structures around the $50, $60 an acre, and that's what we're here. We want to talk to you. Mr. Secretary, we're really keen on pre-harvest desiccation of crops, because that's where most herbicides end up in the food chain. Our product is already in the food chain. It works really well. It's in commercialization stage. We have to do more work there, but that's really what we're aiming for. Crop desiccation, pre-harvest desiccation, having a product that's already in the food stream that works really well and takes the chemical herbicides out of the system. So the summary is, our American business, we employ 10 people, California-based, Pasadena-based. We will start up manufacturing US in April next year. And we're ready to talk, ready to move with commercialization. Talk to us, to have a chat. We're really appreciative of being here, and thank you very much for your attention and interest. Thank you.
Next, we have Pete, and we don't want to think about how everything runs on money. We want a world that's better than that, but the reality is that everything does run on money. He is going to be here to talk about his fund and how money is moving towards regeneration, because money is what still makes the world go around.
Thank you. It's true. Like it or not, we need capital to accelerate some of the effort here. And background quickly is Trailhead Capital is an early stage venture capital fund focused on regenerative food, ag, and supply chain tech companies. So what I'm going to do is hit on the regenerative agriculture market and how to capture it pretty quickly here. In 2025, the regenerative agriculture market was $15 billion. That's been growing at a 15% rate annually. Take that to 2035, that brings it to about $60 billion. North America comprises about 38% of that, and that is while U.S. farmland is only 3 to 12% of U.S. farmland is touched by regen practices. So overall, I still think that's a bit of an understatement when you consider some of the potential and growth rates that we're seeing in biologicals, which is already a $12 billion market, and the potential for automation in the $54 billion US labor market. Another way to consider it is just the overall dollars being invested in the space globally. Step back, there's roughly $850 billion going into food and ag globally. About 6 to 10% of that touches regen. Again, there's a lot of questions and skepticism around some of those qualifications, but that translates to roughly $60 billion. All that to say, I think we can all appreciate now more than ever, it's in a good position and we're in need of accelerating that capital. I think we all appreciate the plight of the US farmer, but it's probably worth highlighting really the pressure that big ag and big food are under. We see it in the M&A and activism on the big food side. A lot of this driven by the changes GLP-1s are driving in food demand and the search for higher quality, nutrient-dense foods. We see it in the restructurings being pursued on the big ag side. Fortunately, we really are at a positive inflection point of consumer demand, corporate commitments, and tech. At least what that means on the tech side is we're finally getting to a point where that's affordable enough and capable enough to move some of these projects, some of these companies, some of these products forward expeditiously in a timeline that we all need to and that the capital is looking for. What we see, and again, plenty of variability here, but done right, regenerative ag practices incorporated could increase profit for the US farmer anywhere from 15 to 80%, depending on the crop. Overall, that translates to $25 to $50 billion more of profit for the US farmer. It is worth sharing, it's with insight, and I think there's tremendous progress and momentum behind that. To that point, it's worth highlighting that this space really does touch on sectors that are receiving a lot of attention. That is defense, AI, and health. Food security is national security. AI is critical and foundational to a lot of the companies in the space. As we drive the move from a reactive to a proactive healthcare system, regenerative agriculture has the potential to really capture the $8.5 trillion market that is the convergence of food, health, and wellness. We're getting there. We're getting there. We don't need to go through all this, particularly in the interest of time, but what it's meant to do is just highlight there is some precedent for big outcomes of companies in the space. I think it's also important to consider when we're talking about regenerative agriculture. Absolutely, on-farm practices are important to consider, but that spans the full value chain through the supply chain and to the consumer. So at least on-farm and outside the farm gate in the supply chain, there's precedent for companies realizing exits of anywhere from $1 billion upwards of $8 billion. Some of the information here just highlights some of the recent fundraisers that are encouraging in terms of the value that is being derived and that is being realized through some of these companies. There are some biologicals companies, computational genetics companies, and even a supply chain company that have recently raised, I should note Halter has actually recently raised a $2 billion valuation. Collars for cattle, venture for virtual fencing to really improve crop rotation and rotational grazing. We had invested in the company Vents that was similar. Merck bought it a while ago, so fortunately I think Halter is accelerating things from there. When we think about investing in the space, we really think it's important to take a systems level approach. Again, we think that includes on-farm and outside the farm gate opportunities. Broadly, we categorize opportunities within each of those verticals as on-farm, inputs, automation, yield improvement. Outside the farm gate, we're looking at finance, fintech and other financial mechanisms, digital infrastructure, and distribution. So within inputs, we touched on it, we like biologicals, $12 billion market, growing at 15%, expected to get to $40 billion by 2032. Not only are they cleaner and not as susceptible to negative externalities like supply chain disruptions, but at this point, oftentimes they are cheaper than conventional methodologies. When we started investing in the space in 2021, it was a big step because we were finally seeing cost parity, but with wars and other supply chain disruptions, they have since gotten a lot cheaper. So running through that in the interest of time, on the automation side, of course, we're all witnessing the progress on the AI side. It's brought into question the viability of a lot of software companies out there, but it's highlighted the potential to digitize the physical world. And within that, of course, that's ag. So when you consider potential for automation, look at the US supply chain level, $300 billion in ag labor spend has the potential for $30 billion in cost savings if you just automate 15% of that. US ag labor, $54 billion market, automate 15% of that could translate to $5 billion in savings. Upstream, we are seeing progress in terms of yield improvements. Again, computational genetics companies that are developing seeds for 50% faster, 90% cheaper. That is $5 to $10 million in 3 to 4 years versus the 7 to 8 years and $100 million plus typically available. On the downstream side, importantly in finance, there really is the need to unlock more finance. We see it on the debt side. We've got transition financing in the debt fund and equity fund. Camo Ag's an important example that really they were digitizing the back office for SPTS organizations, sourcing upwards of $100 million in loans per month, and only 10% of that was being approved. So really, we improved data availability, underwriting capabilities. We think we can 10x available financing that's already at the FCS organizations. Now I realize we're a little short on time, so I will leave it at that.
All right, thank you guys all for sharing. Super important, innovative products. We really appreciate you guys talking about them. I think the key piece to all of this is in order for our farmers to use these products, we need to bring the education in. We need to highlight the education because none of these products can do anything without proper education, farmers understanding the soil biology that's going on their farm. Secretary Kennedy, I want to give you an opportunity to make any comments about the products that you saw or ask any questions to any of us up here on stage.
I'm mainly here to listen, but I'll just make a couple of sort of high-level comments. My journey took me through public health, and our health, as a MAHA report recognizes, our health is directly related to our food. And the quality of our food is directly related to and dependent on the quality of our soils. My agency and NIH were doing, I've commissioned all kinds of these new studies on the role of the microbiome, which has been which is the largest organ in our body and has been the most ignored by science. But we already know enough to know that the health of the microbiome affects every organ in the body. It affects our mood, it affects mental health, and the quality and health of the microbiome in our body is absolutely dependent on the microbiomes and the soils from which our food is derived. Food does not, when the microbiome is not healthy, is not producing the micronutrients that are required for brain growth and function and physical growth and bone growth. Just from a public health standpoint, we need to make the soil the central focus of all of our public health discussions. And the health of the farms depends on it, because if you have a bad microbiome, it's not, the soil can't absorb, and you get runoff, and we now have, I think, 40 or 50 growing seasons left before all of our topsoil is eroded. This is a crisis. It's an existential crisis. I've spent many, many years working on farm issues. I spent about 20 years suing CAFOs all over this country. I've sued the pesticide companies. And I've spent a lot of time, I grew up on a farm. I was a 4-H kid. I spent a lot of time with farmers. When we did the MAHA report, we had over 100 meetings with farmers and farm organizations, and trying to move to a place where we could all get a unified agenda. The impediment is because of perverse incentives that have been dictated by 50, 60 years by federal policies. Most American farmers are locked into a system that they didn't choose and they don't like. In my discussions over 40 years with farmers, consistently one of the things that they all mention is we want markets, we don't want inputs, and we want to reduce our inputs, and we don't want government handouts. But we don't have a market economy. We have an economy that's dictated by perverse federal policies that are locking people into chemical-intensive agriculture and that are destroying our soil. Iowa now has the highest cancer rates in our country, and I think we all know why that is. It's destructive and they don't like it. It has nothing to do with free market capitalism. In a true free market, you can't make yourself rich without making your neighbors rich and without enriching your community. What the chemical industry and all polluters do is they make themselves rich by making everybody else poor. They raise standards of living for themselves by lowering quality of life for the rest of us. And they do that by escaping the discipline of the free market. If you're an actor in the free market, a true free market, you have to pay all the costs of bringing your product to the marketplace. But pollution and the chemical industry relies on it is its capacity to externalize those costs, force the public to pay the cost of production, and poor health and diminished quality of life, and diminish soils and diminish the richness of our lives. One of the great joys for me when I was a kid was going out on a spring day and seeing this explosion of color from the butterflies. And every puddle in the springtime that I walked through was bubbling with frog eggs and tadpoles. My kids are never going to see that. We had bugs on our windscreens, even on a short ride. And people aren't complaining that's not the case anymore, but it's something I notice a lot because it's destroying the diversity of our planet, and it's destroying the richness of our lives. And it's not only biologically impoverishing us, but it's spiritually impoverishing us. This is a spiritual battle. We are all engaged in spiritual warfare, and these people who are up here sharing this stage with me, and everybody in the room understands that there is a fundamental conflict here between warring systems, the systems of darkness, the apocalyptical systems of ignorance and greed, and those of us who are looking toward the light and trying to construct a system that instead of a reward that does what market capital is supposed to do, which is to reward good behavior and punish bad behavior. And we don't have that system anymore, and we're losing something vital about our country. Thomas Jefferson said that American democracy was completely reliant on the existence of tens of thousands of freeholds owned by family farmers, each with a stake in our system of government, and each has a stake in our political system. The consolidations that are put on steroids by the centralization and the concentration, the vertical integration, and the increasing reliance on inputs is destroying that model. Frederick Jackson Turner, who was our greatest American historian, said that American democracy came out of the forests and the fields and the wilderness areas. Without those, we wouldn't have evolved the political systems that did evolve. But it's a spiritual battle because God talks to all of us through different vectors, through each other, through organized religions, through the great books of those religions, through the prophets and wise people, and through art and literature and music and poetry. Nowhere with the precision and texture and grace and joy is through creation. This has been something that's been recognized by American thinkers. There was a period immediately after the Revolutionary War up until about 1840 when Americans were really unsure of who they were because we had been British. We were Europeans, and now we had broken that umbilical cord with Europe. So there was a struggle to figure out, who are we? Are we kind of like the Greeks because we are reenacting democracy or resuscitating democracy? And all of our federal buildings started building with Doric columns, Ionian columns. There was a meeting around 1840 of all the great philosophers in our country and biologists and artists, and all came together in the Adirondacks to really define the American experience. They came out of that saying, if you're an American, you don't have to be ashamed because you don't have the 1,500 years of culture that they have in Europe, because you have this relationship to the land that makes our country unique. It's a departure from the feudal system where the land base was controlled by a few wealthy people. And you have this dispersion, and that is going to be the source of your values and your virtues and our character as a people. It's not an accident that the central revelation of every major religion happens in the countryside. So Buddha had to go to the countryside and sit under the Bodhi tree to have his first experience with nirvana. Moses had to spend 40 years in the wilderness and then go to the wilderness of Ararat or Mount Sinai to get the commandments and to have his first revelations with the divine. Christ had to spend 40 days alone in the countryside to to discover his divinity for the first time. His mentor was John the Baptist, who lived in a cave in the Jordan Valley and ate locusts and the honey of wild bees. And that direct connection to nature gave them a wisdom that is unavailable to the rest of us. When we destroy nature, when we destroy our relationship with the abundance and the diversity of nature, we destroy our capacity to sense the divine. And that's a cost that is very unwise for us to shoulder on ourselves. I would say it's immoral for us to impose that on our children. All of us are fighting for that vision where we can restore the American experience with the land. All virtue comes from the countryside. And we have corrupted the countryside with chemicals and inputs now. These are the leaders who are cutting a new path to bring us back to where our nation is supposed to be, to its idealism and moral authority.
Do you think there is a way for us to move? There's massive amounts of subsidies in our insurance system for farming, and then in growing stuff we don't even need. We're making 40% of our corn is going into ethanol, and then we pay for it twice over with SNAP and then again with Medicare to Medicaid and all the medical stuff. Like, how can we move from striving for cheap food towards striving for nutrient-dense food that we maybe only pay for once instead of 3 times?
Yeah, if you'd asked me even a couple of months ago, this issue of agriculture and how it's locked in this concentrated system of inputs, of chemical inputs, seemed to me to be insurmountable. The only path out is a little step-by-step, baby step paths of encouraging regenerative farming. What happened with the Farm Bill this week? Because you saw Republicans and Democrats get together and they got the message that there is something totally corrupt about how we've allowed these companies to run our government. And they took away the thing they most wanted, which was this immunity from liability. I think we're at an inflection point now, and all the hard work. I've often used the metaphor for when you're trying to win on an environmental issue, that it's like turning a giant tanker with a tugboat, and you have to just keep hitting the bow again and again, and maybe hundreds or even 1,000 times, but then suddenly it hits that inflection point and it turns immediately. I think that is a signal what we saw this week, that all the hard work that you've been doing on the ground for so long is finally beginning to pay off, and that the political system is now in revolt against the vested interests who have locked us into this corrupt system there where we're poisoning our people under the guise of feeding them, and that the food is not food. If you don't have any nutrients in the food, it is not food.
Amen. We have 5 minutes. Does anybody on our panel have a question specifically for the secretary?
What did you do in 4-H? I didn't know you were in 4-H.
I had Guernseys.
I have a question. What do you and the administration think that success looks like in this regenerative movement that we're in?
Right now, we're between EPA, USDA, and my agency. We're putting $1 billion into regenerative farming and different aspects of it, and getting off of pesticides. We have a $700 million, Brooke Rollins has a $700 million pilot program for regenerative farming, and they were blown away. They got an unprecedented response. They got 13,000 applications within a few days. We signed, I think, 136 contracts with $39 million, but there's a recognition that this is a pilot program, and we need to scale this. If you ask me what I want, the same thing that we did with the Rural Transformation Fund, I want $50 billion to really start jump-starting this transformation. There'll be a battle within the administration. You know, there's a lot of people, I think that reversal on the Farm Bill this week was a wake-up call for Washington, D.C. They see the power out there of the Maha Moms and of the regenerative farm movement and all these different groups who are now outside of the political system, and they've got pitchforks and torches. They're coming for the power structure in Washington, so I think there may be.
Secretary Kennedy, what would you say to the legislators that did vote for the liability shield, and that is where their moral compass is at this moment?
I've been around those people my whole life. There's no talking to them because they're taking the money and they have a system that they're locked in. But I think they should be getting nervous because the public is turning against them.
Can I ask the other side of that question? What would you say to the farmer out on the skinny branches, not sure if they can make it in this regenerative world, but is taking the risk and following how they're being led? What do you have to say to him?
I don't give advice to farmers because I leave that to people like Rick, who can speak from experience, and who have, and Gabe Brown, and all these other incredible regenerative farmers, John Kemp, many others, who are pioneering these pathways, and they're saying to people, there is an off-ramp. And for most farmers, and it's kind of, I talk to the row croppers all the time, and they're losing money 7 out of 10 years. They're locked in a system that they want to get out of, but they just don't see the off-ramp. I think it's people like this, like Rick, we're showing them an off-ramp, and it's one where they can run a business and make money and support their families and do something that they're really proud of, do something that they want to be doing. That's why they're on the farm. They're not on the farm to make Monsanto rich.
Mr. Secretary, it also takes those programs that came, the $700 million that needs to go to $50 billion.
Secretary Kennedy, how do you see us? You made a comment in your talk about getting back to free market capitalism. I think we all love the fact that the government has put some money towards these programs, the $700 million. You talk about $50 billion, and I'll say from experience, our audience is okay with the olive branch right now, but we want an off ramp. There needs to be an off ramp where we get off of the subsidies from the government. We don't want to be bribed to do these practices. We want to be able to use the money right now, transition, and then get off of it and let our economy get back to where we're not in this debt cycle.
We don't have free markets. There's very few places where there's free markets left in this country, and there's certainly not a market throughout most of medicine. In my agency, which is the biggest agency in government, we're twice the size of the Pentagon. 48 cents out of every American dollar is now going to health. That is spent on taxes. If you look at it, if you also include Social Security and the military, it's 48 cents out of every dollar. The reason that's happening is almost entirely, or most of it, because of reverse incentives that have allowed the food industry to mass poison the American people, and then reverse incentives that have allowed the cost of what we do to spiral out of control, because we don't have for most of medicine, although we're now increasing it, we don't have a market system. We have a fee-for-service system that encourages every element, the pharmaceutical companies, the hospitals, the doctors, the insurance companies, all make more money if they keep us sick. We need to change, we need to get back to markets, in my view, everywhere. There's a market, and we need decentralization. And concentrations of wealth and power and control are not good for democracy. They're not good for the human spirit. I'm trying to transform my agency so that it turns into a market-based agency. USDA has been locked in this and is like a monolith for many years, but I think for the first time understands it. The more that you can do to get up there and educate the politicians, you did an incredible job, because this vote shows that there is a fortress that's starting to crumble. I feel like we're really at an inflection point in history, and that there's these new technologies, these robotic technologies that promise a future. I talked to a woman, Courtney, she's the biggest onion farmer in Texas. She has 8,000 acres in South Texas, and she brought a machine like this. It's made by a competitor of yours, Carbon Robotics. It's a laser weeder. Her father didn't want her to buy it. It's $1 million for the machine. And she put it in the onion field, and 3 weeks after she got the machine, her father bought 2 more of them. It has shortened her growing season by 3 weeks. It's increased her yield by 30%. And she was paying $2,000 to $3,000 a month for chemical inputs. She's now down, the cost now, including the machine, is $300 per acre. $2,000 to $3,000 an acre for chemical inputs. She's now down to $300 an acre. Most of that is the interest on that machine.
It's healthy food.
And it's good food. So she's sold, and we're seeing, I think this technology is going to proliferate across all of the major vegetable crops. It's more difficult with the row crops because their chemical costs are less per acre. And so the margin for the margins that they need do not offer the kind of transformational sort of profit rewards that this machine does. I'm hopeful that there's a whole generation of new technologies that we've looked at, drones that kill weeds and all of this, and the use of AI that all emphasize the fact that we are now at an inflection point with a real opportunity to change the entire economic model of the system.
Thank you.
Thank you for everybody that's coming. This is going to conclude this portion of the presentation. I want to remind you there's 2 kitchens, so if everybody went to one kitchen to order lunch, it's going to take longer. But there's one up here and one down below. 100% of the protein was either grown on the ranch or by force of nature or Smoke River Ranch. So we're really lucky to have 100% regenerative meat for the lunch today, and people can order up top or down below. Thank you all for coming.